Over the past week, there's been quite a bit in the way of news around Cyberpunk 2077. We saw the listing of the world of Cyberpunk 2077. This is a lore book that you can purchase right now, but with that came quite a bit in the way of new game details, including a top-down look at the map of Cyberpunk 2077. Outside of that, we heard some just general interviews and new details around the game, its length, and its story, but also quite a bit of progress has been made around the ARG for Cyberpunk 2077, which if you haven't been following, I'll give you a bit of a recap and really explain where it stands now or what has been discovered thus far, as it is definitely interesting. If you want to hear more or just stay up to date with the latest news and happenings around Cyberpunk, you can leave a like or subscribe. But otherwise, let's take a look first at the world of Cyberpunk 2077 Deluxe Edition, as well as all of the revelations that came with it. So basically, this is not a new edition of the game, but rather going to be a lore book. It'll give you some background, some history, and some of the major factions, characters, and other things in the Cyberpunk universe, and it actually is slated to release on April 21st, 2020, so a little bit after the release of Cyberpunk 2077 itself. But to go along with this, we of course got several teaser images of what will be included with this, and it actually reveals quite a bit around the game. All throughout the Cyberpunk gameplay, a major focus we've been seeing are the gangs of Cyberpunk 2077. In the gameplay from 2018, we saw quite a bit of the Maelstrom gang and what exactly they have going on, but separately this year we of course saw a lot about the Voodoo Boys and took on the Animals. In this new promotional image, you could see representation for several of these known gangs, although something we also see are two new gangs that seem to be announced from this. The first of which is 6th Street. There's not really much to infer, we do see two different takes on their logo, but then separately above that you could also see the Mox. Outside of these logos, not much is known about these just yet, but swiping over to the other side, you also can see some of the vehicles from Cyberpunk. One such one is one we've seen quite extensively in game to begin with, nothing crazy or new here. The vehicle above that was shown off prominently in some of the other promotional images, although we haven't seen too much of that in game, but on the other side we have a look at two totally new vehicles that we really haven't seen anywhere. The top does look just like a pretty normal car, but the bottom one does seem like a pickup truck of some kind, which definitely is exciting and pretty cool. We've heard in the past how you're going to have garages, Cyberpunk themed races, and even some degree of vehicle customization, so it's nice to see several of the different options we'll have to go through all of that. But the aspect of this new image to garner the most attention is without a doubt the top-down view of the Cyberpunk 2077 map. Technically, we've gotten glances of the map in the past, most of this actually being an in-game 3D model or kind of little cutscene that you do go through, but as far as just a traditional paper-styled map that you know and love from many games, we really haven't gotten much. And now to be clear with this one, it doesn't look like this may be quite a comprehensive map. If you compare it to the subway or metro map, you can see that there definitely is more over to the left side and potentially even more to the top side. It's not totally clear how much larger this is. We don't know if the metro map is totally to scale, but the image that gets me particularly excited is actually from one of the past teases of Cyberpunk and incorporating that area into this new overhead map. And here you could really see the density that will be featured here. Now it's safe to assume not all of these buildings will be totally interactable or not all of the floors will be accessible, but we know that they are trying to make much of this accessible. And it's been heavily described how verticality will play a large role in exploration with this city. And for me at least, I think it's almost hard to gauge. From some of the gameplay you could see how tall some of those buildings are, and of course that is a lot of place to store content. There have been a lot of comparisons already to Grand Theft Auto 5's map, as it is probably one of the most comparable in a modern video game, but even exploration in that city versus some of the gameplay we have of Cyberpunk already, it's clear that Night City is notably more built up than Liberty City. And outside of just this verticality focus from CD Projekt, we've heard other things about the city of Cyberpunk, specifically around how the crowds will act in this city. In a recent interview, it was described how actually getting some of these functional crowds to move around in a cohesive group and just throughout the city was actually quite a technical challenge, but they described the crowd system they have right now as a real achievement, and even further how many of the crowds in this will really act as having many unique characters moving around the space, and how it's a combination of AI, tech, and art. And frankly, if you actually compare some of the crowd or people density you can see in the gameplay compared to other games like Grand Theft Auto, again, it is night and day. But of course that is now a fairly old demo, so we'll have to see what we get on release. Either way, I think the map of Cyberpunk 2077 will be a very unique and interesting one. It doesn't seem like any modern game has attempted something quite so built up or dense. I'm pretty excited to get to explore it. Although outside of that, from another recent interview, we heard quite a bit around the story of Cyberpunk 2077. The story director of this game describes how, in The Witcher, a lot of the stories were focused around small human dramas, while in Cyberpunk, the story is on a much grander scale, and how several characters will have depth in the way of being torn by internal drama or just being completely unusual. And as far as how much story or dialogue there is, it's described that it actually takes up 2 thick book volumes, so seemingly the characters will have quite a bit to say in this game. But moving away from some of those details and revelations, I do want to take another and closer look at the ARG around Cyberpunk 2077. If you haven't been following this, it's actually kind of the second ARG around this game. The last one ended up with some cool prizes and rewards for those who participated, so keeping up to date is actually pretty helpful. Which, speaking of, if you do want to keep up to date, I'll have some appropriate links down below, such as to the Game Detective's website, that pretty regularly will update a post around what the latest happenings are. Thus far, in the Cyberpunk ARG, there's been a lot to go on. Numerous websites that need to be used, actual physical locations that somebody had to go to, numerous codes to break or put together in a certain way, but eventually all of this led to a specific Reddit account that known as CorpThing. For a while, this account laid mostly dormant, having a few posts here and there and DMing back with some users that reach out, but then something pretty big came on September 5th. A user named Shazan Sill actually had a pretty interesting back and forth through DMs on Reddit with CorpThing, ending off by saying that Sandra Dorset had actually escaped the hospital and she wanted them to fail, and how we need to find her before she finds us. If you're not familiar, Sandra Dorset was actually featured at the start of last year's gameplay demo of Cyberpunk 2077. She's the one you see get taken to the hospital by the trauma team. This was shared on the Game Detective's Discord, and a few days later, a very interesting user joined. Someone named Sandra D joined the Game Detective's Discord and actually confronted Shazan Sill, claiming that he faked DMs with a Corp agent, and how that is a very brave move. There's some back and forth about the legitimacy of this account, but eventually Sandra D describes how CorpThing found a key sheet and he holds it for himself. Once he cracks the next step, which happens to be this week, he will give it to you. It will be too late though, and specifically to look for the numbers and letters in empty cells and how the empty cells are the key. This was later confirmed by CorpThing describing how Sandra D actually got access to that account. But later that day, we saw how the Cyberpunk 2077 official Twitter actually released this image, a Sudoku puzzle that was later solved, which became handy a few weeks later when CorpThing made its first original post on Reddit titled "Found This," providing a key sheet for the Grill cipher. So now I'm oversimplifying this whole process. I'm leaving out some of the steps and definitely not conveying quite how much effort actually went into this, but just know that a lot of work from a lot of people went into figuring all this out, but the end result from these two pieces gave the message: V, digital ghosts look out, Blackwall is real, Alt Cunningham, run away, they're watching you on Wednesday, Soul Killer, Netwatch, Araska, CorpThing is the enemy, are you a netrunner? Gary. The exact relevance of that still isn't totally clear. It may provide very useful at a future point, but a few weeks later we saw the return of Sandra D on the Game Detective's Discord. Here, she actually typed out a fairly cryptic code, that being this, and said to contact her once the solution had been found. Users tried sending a variety of things, but the solution seemed to just be Netwatch, and further clarifying that the riddle is a clue to the next step. And this is sort of where things are left. It's not totally clear where this is applicable or what's next to find, if there's still more to uncover around what has been found thus far. Separately from this, just recently in the past couple of weeks, a new website has been found, that with netwatchncpd.com, and on that website, subpages with a login form were also discovered, but how exactly this all ties together or what the next clue or solution isn't totally clear. So that's large in part where it stands right now. It's again not clear where this goes next or when the next clue will be given. And if it wasn't clear already, I'm not actually the one doing all of this work. Much of this is being done on the Game Detective's Discord by many users active on that. Separately, they have a really good write-up again on their website, which I used as a source along with their Discord to actually formulate this part of the video. So if you want to keep up to date with the latest, that's probably a good place to head to. I'll have links down below to both of those things. But just as an aside, my overall commentary on it, I think this is awesome, involving some characters that we already have seen gameplay of and that are known already. But this back and forth between the developers and community has been pretty awesome to witness and experience. I will definitely have further updates as more is discovered or whatever happens next in this entire thing. Although separately, one other thing to just keep an eye out for is the Game Awards on December 12th at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. There's really been no indication that CD Projekt will actually be there or will be showcasing a Cyberpunk trailer, but if there was a major event to do this at, that would be the one. Separately, the game now is just 4 months and change away. It's really not even that far. The wait is coming to an end, so we'll probably see more or hear more around this game as the final stretch of the marketing campaign does begin. Either way, as always, again, I thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, but with that, I hope to see you all next time. Later.
You can come out now.
My, you're brave. My father can even do that.
Mine could do a lot more. Come.